Hey friends, Ash here. Welcome back to Gents. Hope you're well. As you can tell by the title of the video, I got in the new Le Mans Elixir Absolu. Look at it there, covered in gold, and it only cost me my soul. Nah, I'm just playing, soul intact, but it did cost a whole lot of money. I actually ordered this off of eBay. Yeah, I know. I've ranted, I've raved about how many fakes there are on eBay, but sometimes I guess you gotta take a chance and overpay by a good amount. Which is what I did, and now I have it. Yay! Now, as of when I'm filming this, it is not available in the US just yet. I did reach out to some discounters and ask them, hey, are you getting this in? Do you know when you are? Do you plan to? Like, what's the deal? Fill me in. Give me the info. And I was told by Fragrance Spy that they're expecting it anytime. So, yay again. Patience is not always my strong suit. So if you're looking for this one, be aware that as of when I put this out, there's probably gonna be this one popping up at Fragrance Spy in the next week or so. So eyes peeled. And if they have a listing for this one, I'll link to it in the description. That way, even if it's not available or whatever, you can have it there and you can put in your email address if you want to be notified and all that good stuff. But yeah, the new one, the new Le Mans Elixir Absolu, a flanker of a flanker, my favorite thing. This is one that I have really anticipated ever since I first heard about it, because this one, Le Mans Elixir, is pretty much my favorite Le Mans at this point. It surpassed Le Mans Le Parfum for me. I know some other people would say, no, Le Mans Le Parfum is better than the Elixir, but I like the Elixir just a little bit more. And I feel like this, up until now, has been the pinnacle of the line. And I was wanting to see if they could improve on it. Kind of a tall order, a tall task, because this is one of the few fragrances that I've actually put a sizable dent into. I own a lot of stuff, a whole lot. And so it has to be really good in order to actually get used enough to where you pick it up and you go, oh, there's a good chunk missing. And this is one of the few that has had that happen. So as of this video, as of right this minute, I don't know what this is going to go for in terms of retail pricing in the US when it finally does hit, Macy's and all those stores. I do know the retail pricing for this one right here though. It goes for $126 US for this size 75 mils, or you can get the 125 mil size bottle for $160 US, which really, all things considered, not that expensive. Most Elixir fragrances from other brands are way pricier than that, and most of the time they're also smaller bottles. So the fact that you can get a 125 mil of this one for, $160, honestly, not priced that bad. If Elixir Absolu holds to the same price point, then that's what it's gonna be. If it is a little bit more expensive, I would expect it to go for maybe $175 for the 125 mil, and then maybe $140 for the 75 mil, but we'll have to see when it actually hits. So all that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at the presentation. As you can see, it's pretty much the same with one small difference. Then after that, we'll start talking about how this one smells, how it's different from the original Elixir, and whether or not it's better or worse, at least in my opinion. We begin with the can. As always, Jean Paul Gaultier, Le Mans, and Le Beau fragrances come in a little can instead of a box because they're just so quirky like that. On the front, you have the name of the house, name of the fragrance, and really no decoration or anything on this one. It's just a gold can. Nothing up top. On the bottom, you have your badge code and your barcode. My badge code is 42961. And as always, I do have to let you know, pull down on the bottom and there's where your bottle will be. I know at this point everybody knows, but don't take a can opener to it. Just give it a little tug. A little tug. And here is the bottle, pretty much the exact same as the original Elixir, except instead of it being see-through with kind of an amber colored glass, it's just all gold. That is really the only difference here. Then on the bottom, you're gonna find your bottle information as well as your badge code. As always, you have a little pull tab right there to keep the bottle from spraying when you don't want it to. Let's go ahead and share a few sprays of the atomizer while we're at it here. Really good. That's how it always is. Those Le Male Le Beau atomizers, some of the best. Now, as I alluded to earlier, Elixir Absolu is in kind of a tough spot here. It's following up a fragrance that a lot of people put as the absolute best Elixir release ever. You know, of this multitude of Elixir fragrances that we've been being hit with, bashed over the head with, this one is put right up there as one of the like top 2 or 3 best ones. And this is also coming out at a time where a lot of people are kind of hitting back on all the different elixirs. They're saying, okay, you know, enough of it. I don't care about Elixir fragrances anymore. So it's kind of uphill, at least initially, you know, as this is being initially released. And since we're talking Elixir, let's give that one a little spritz as well. So first things first, let's talk about the note breakdown differences, and there are a few. With the original Elixir, it had a somewhat more fleshed out note breakdown. Off the top, there is lavender and mint, then vanilla and benzoin in the mid, honey, tonka, and even tobacco as it dries down. So while it doesn't have a massive note breakdown, at least it's not a pathetically small, infantile, itty bitty excuse for a note breakdown. You call that a note breakdown? That? Ooh, okay. Ooh. Rough.
You just wanted to make fun of me.
So I'll take it. Not a huge note breakdown, but it gives us a little more info. This new one, Elixir Absolu, yeah, it's got 3 notes. Those notes are lavender, plum, tonka. There you go. So obviously the thing that's gonna stick out the most there is the plum in the mid, because it shares lavender and it shares tonka with the original Elixir. So how does it smell? How does it open up? Well, Elixir Absolu has much more of a fruity sweetness when you first spray it on. Maybe not surprising, because again, it does have that plum in the note breakdown, but it is noticeably more fruity, a little bit more sugary when you first spray it on, and it's not as deep and rich in terms of how the sweetness hits when compared to the original Elixir. Now, even though there's not mint in the note breakdown for Elixir Absolu, you do get a little bit of that sweet mint in the opening, melding together with a little touch of lavender as well. So even though that's not noted, you can still pick it up. And Elixir Absolu is close enough to Le Male Elixir that you can tell that this is a flanker of this. It's the same overall makeup, just approaching things in a different way. So more fruity, and the sweetness hits in a way that comes across more syrupy. And in terms of the opening, I actually love the opening of Elixir Absolu. I think it smells really, really nice, and it's a good change, a good switch up from what Elixir does. But if you're looking for the deeper, richer fragrance between the two, it's gonna be the original one. And the way that the plum hits is kind of reminiscent a little bit of like how the plum hits in Scandal Absolu. Now, I'm not saying that this smells like Scandal Absolu, it does not. But the way that the plum hits is a little bit reminiscent of that. Maybe with like a little touch of like the Bad Boy Cobalt plum in there as well. I know those are like 2 of the only major plum releases for men, or fragrance releases for men specifically, that feature plum, but it's kind of like in between those two. It's not as fresh as how Bad Boy Cobalt hits, but then it's also not quite as like warm and cozy as how Scandal Absolu hits. It's somewhere between those. Now, unfortunately, that opening does not last a whole heck of a long time with Elixir Absolu here. And to me, that's the best part of the fragrance. So a little more sweet, fruity, not quite as deep, not quite as honeyed. And then as it starts to dry down, you get almost like a bubbly iris note that comes out in Elixir Absolu. Again, that's not an official note here, but it's like this bubbly, sweet iris, not really like makeup-y, but it is a little bit powdery, and it's drizzled with plum syrup, essentially. So you still have that sweet aspect that's going on, and that really hits as you start to head through the mid. And as it dries down further, that fruity aspect, the plum, it starts to kind of dissipate. It still is sweet and takes on kind of a creamy sweetness, like a little creamy powdery. And the tonka comes out more and more as the fragrance dries down, which makes sense. That's the only note that they put in the official note breakdown for the base of the fragrance. But yeah, you get more of that tonka that comes out as the fragrance dries down. So again, a little more sweetness there as you hit the dry down. Now, maintaining that difference from the original Le Male Elixir. It's not as honeyed, it's not as deep, not as rich, and it's almost like you have this swirling faint lavender note in Elixir Absolu. Kind of carries over from the opening into the mid, even into parts of the dry down. And while both of these fragrances are quite sweet, they approach it in a different way from the opening all the way into the dry down, while still being similar enough that, like I said earlier, you can tell Elixir Absolu is based off of Elixir. It's just instead of that honeyed, tobacco, vanilla, tonka kind of, like I said, very rich, bold kind of sweetness, they instead flipped it and said, okay, make it a little more syrupy, more fruity, with kind of this sparkling iris that's also a little bit powdery as it heads through the mid. You know, mix that in there as well and approach it from that direction. So some people, I'm sure, would smell Elixir Absolu and say, oh, to me it's a little bit less sweet. It's more fruity, yes, but not as sweet, because I'm not getting hit with vanilla on top of honey, on top of tonka, on top of sweet tobacco that's kind of in the background, but still giving more sweetness. And then other people would say, nah, I think Elixir Absolu is sweeter because it's a little more high-end, syrupy, a little sugary, and could potentially be headache-inducing depending on how much you spray on when you really get walloped from the opening heading through the mid with the plum and that little bubbly, effervescent, sweet, sugary aspect that hits. To me, Elixir Absolu opens up sweeter than Elixir does, just because of how it kind of hits you off the top. And then as you hit the dry down, I would actually say Elixir maintains more of its sweetness, whereas a lot of Elixir Absolus fades away by the time you hit the far dry down. So they kind of swap spots. One is initially sweeter to me, and then in the dry down, the other one is a little bit more so. But again, like I've said 3 or 4 times, it is a different type of sweetness with each one of these, with that tonka being held in a similar way in each one of them, just the supporting notes are done differently. Now, another thing that's really important when it comes to Elixir fragrances is the performance. And how does this stack up with Elixir? In terms of projection, in terms of longevity, it's right there. It's a great performing fragrance, and especially off the top, it's got some pretty good push. When that plum, lavender, mint, kind of sweet, syrupy aspects are all kicking, it pushes pretty hard. Now, I haven't worn this side by side with equal sprays with the Elixir to see like, okay, this one is lasting 30 minutes longer or anything like that. But just off first impressions, nothing to worry about as far as performance goes, which you would expect. Great longevity, great projection. And in terms of seasonality, same as the original Elixir, more a fall, winter time fragrance for sure. Not something you're gonna be reaching for in spring and summer. As it dries down and you lose some of that sweetness, it does start to lean maybe a little bit more toward like a nice evening fragrance, but I think you could wear during day or night, either one. And actually thinking about that, it does have kind of an interesting aspect in a way where initially when you first spray it on and you're getting hit with the, like I said, the plum, all that other stuff, it does come across like one that maybe seems like, oh, this is gonna lean a little more youthful. But then as it dries down, kind of swaps up a little bit and then isn't as sugary once you do hit the dry down. And so it's kind of interesting in a way where you might smell this initially and be like, oh, it's way too sweet. You know, I can't rock with this. And then once it hits the far dry down, you're like, oh, it's actually not that sweet compared to a lot of things. So I do think that you could wear this across pretty much any age range, which realistically, if you like a fragrance, wear it, who cares? There's no real actual age ranges on fragrances. Now, as far as which one of these I prefer more, I like this one more. I like the original. I think that even though the opening here is really interesting, it's fleeting. And as it works through the mid, I find myself not liking it quite as much as the original. And I do feel like between the two that I would still wear this one a little bit more. But for people out there who are looking for a bit of a twist on the Elixir DNA, that would like more of a fruity aspect and who want the sweetness to hit in kind of a different way over what the original Elixir presented, then this could be a really interesting pickup and may actually work better for you than the original Elixir. But for me, if I had to pick just one, I'm picking this one. That said, Elixir Absolu is still really pleasant, very easy to wear, kind of what you would expect. You know, your typical Jean-Paul Gaultier, sweet, compliment pulling type scent profile. That's what's going on here. It's just, I like the sweetness in this one just a little bit more. I do kind of wish that this came out in like fall or something, so I could have been wearing it through fall and winter, been able to get some more use out of it because as of when I'm filming this, it's about to start heating up again, which means that this is gonna sit on the shelf until fall, and then I can actually give it some more proper wear. But this one is still really nice, and I'm glad to have it in the collection, and I'm gonna wear it more before we head into March, which is like any minute now. So there it is, Elixir Absolu. It had a really tall mountain to climb coming out after this one. And I do actually like some of the changes that they did. Some parts of it are interesting to smell. And I don't mind seeing plum in some more fragrances because really the big ones, it's like what? Bad Boy Cobalt, 1 Million Lucky, Scandal Absolu. Not a whole heck of a lot of stuff. But this stuff is just, it's hard to beat, man. You come out with something that's really solid, really nice, but just, so there we go. Elixir Absolu. Again, if you want to check that one out, it should be available at Fragrance Buy sometime soon, is what they told me. Thank you guys so much for hanging with me. Stay safe out there, take care of yourselves. See you tomorrow with another fragrance video. See you later.